That is one big pile of shit. This could be it. We may be in some multiverse where I don't even exist.
Don't knock rationalization. Where would we be without it?
Yes, without the use. To take them out, take them down, do your stuff. Life finds a way.
Hello and welcome to episode 9 of The Complete Works, a deep dive into the career and films of actor Jeff Goldblum. My name is Mike Smith, and joining me on this journey into the wondrous world of Goldblum is my friend, co-host, and fellow Goldblum maniac,
Mike DeCriscio.
How you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing great, coming to you live from week who knows anymore of quarantine. Time is a human construct.
Yeah, potentially week 5, potentially week 5,000. Who is to say?
We'll never know.
Yeah, I mean, quarantine. It's been happening. We've been talking about it a bit on our other podcast where we'll be doing these quarantine bonus episodes. But just briefly, Mike, like how's it affecting you? How you holding up?
I mean, doing okay. I haven't really been outside further than the curb to get the garbage pail since like March something. So, you know, that's all good. Recently got furloughed from work, so that's not great. But get to collect unemployment, which is good. So right now, I'm kind of just saying it's a vacation, you know, man. We'll see how long I'm able to maintain that lie to myself. But, you know, for now, it's fine.
It's a vacation where you don't leave the house, which, to be fair, is most of your vacations anyway. So
right. I get to play Destiny 2 and watch movies all day. Like, I'm in.
Yeah, there you go. So it's all working out for you. I have also been taking advantage of trying to watch movies a lot. This past weekend, I think my girlfriend was starting to get sick of that, and she was like, no, we got to play like a game or something. We got to like go outdoors and explore a little bit. And I was like, yeah, okay, you're right. So I did.
All right, fine.
I did venture outside for a little bit, but I'm also still going to work, you know, in the mornings and stuff during the week. So it's one of those things where I'm still able to leave the house and go out and do a thing during the day, which is kind of nice. It's one of those things where if that goes away, I'm not sure what my mental state's going to be, but we'll see how it goes. We'll see what happens. The important thing is we're talking about Jeff Goldblum movies, Mike.
We are?
We are.
What?
You sounded so surprised. Have you been watching, like, I don't know, Eddie Murphy movies this whole time?
Nobody told me we weren't supposed to.
You pretended to know what I was talking about this entire time and just going along with it. That's it explains a lot.
I'm pulling a Vin.
Now, across 8 episodes of this show, we've covered Jeff Goldblum's wide and varied early career over the course of 3 years. We've seen him as a man who forgot his mantra. We've seen him as a street punk, a photographer, another street punk, an out-of-work actor, a motorcycle hippie, another street punk. But the podcast has sometimes been difficult only because in all of those roles, Goldblum typically appears for only a few minutes at a time at most, and sometimes only for a couple of seconds, and usually has very few lines, if any. But that all changes with this episode, baby, because Jeff Goldblum made 3 movies in 1977, 2 of which we've covered already, Between the Sentinel and Annie Hall, and he closed out the year with his first major supporting role in an ensemble drama about an alternative newspaper in Boston. Today, we're talking about Joan Micklin Silver's Between the Lines.
In this business, there just isn't any room for people who want to work 9 to 5 and go home to a soft bed. You've got to be on the job 24 hours.
Thursday night, there's a rock promo party. Thursday night, forget it. You'll never have it done. Have I ever missed the deadline? Constantly.
Back Bay Main Line, good morning.
Single male, 25, looking for girl with excessive amounts of body hair, comma, especially on her arms.
You're quitting?
Oh, yeah, this is a book. No more reporting crap.
Reporting crap, 25 cents.
I'm a writer.
Between the small time and the big time, the news hawks of tomorrow live through the good times, the bad times, and the deadlines.
You okay? Jesus, they beat the shit out of you, didn't they? You got a lot of guts, man. You're gonna make a great reporter. You nail those punks with your story.
Now, Stanley, all of us on this paper are either on our way up or on our way down.
Yeah, that's for sure.
That's the nature of the paper. We're all just passing through. Now, I know that one day I'm going to leave here. And before I leave here, I'm going to punch you.
Where are you?
Between the Lines, starring John Hurd, Marilu Henner, and Michael J. Pollard.
See you, pal.
So, Joan Micklin Silver was a woman who married film producer Raphael Silver in the 50s, and in the 70s they began to make movies together. She developed a pretty solid string of movies, too. Her feature debut, Hester Street, got an Oscar nomination for lead actress Carol Kane, and she'd make a few more solid hits like Chilly Scenes of Winter, which is a Pure Cinema podcast favorite, a podcast that we listen to a lot. They mentioned that a couple times, and Crossing Delancey in the 80s. Most of her career from the 80s onward is spent making TV movies, and she appears to be retired now, with her last credit arriving in 2003 with a movie called Hunger Point. But before she was a filmmaker, Joan Micklin Silver had previously worked for The Village Voice, and the film's writer, Fred Barron, had worked for the Boston Phoenix and The Real Paper, so they each drew from their shared experiences working in journalism and these alternative counterculture environments to create the story of a fictional Boston main line in this movie. The movie was not a huge hit, but it was a mild critical success. It won a couple of awards at the Berlin International Film Festival, and even had a short-lived sitcom based on it shortly after its release.
Huh, how about that?
Yeah, there you go. I could not find any information about that sitcom, by the way. So that might be completely false. Wikipedia just says that in like the description at the bottom. Like, there's a sitcom based on this. So maybe there was just also a sitcom called Between the Lines. I have no idea what it was about, but there it is. Apparently, it was based on this movie.
The Between the Lines cinematic universe.
Exactly. It is wide and varied. But in 1977, Joan Micklin Silver assembled a pretty incredible pool of talented young actors, many of whom would go on to be pretty well known, but the most notable for us is, of course, Jeff Goldblum. He's the guy this podcast is about.
What?
What? It's not Eddie Murphy? About a year ago, Quad Cinema in New York did a Jeff Goldblum retrospective series, and Between the Lines got a newly restored print where it was sort of rediscovered and perhaps reappreciated by audiences that may have forgotten about it. This movie feels like a major stepping stone in the career of Jeff Goldblum because it feels like the first one to really realize what Goldblum brings to a role and utilizes it the entire time. Were you prepared for how much Goldblum was in this movie, Mike, before you started watching it?
Absolutely not. Just the last 8 episodes have been any indication. I expected him to have a couple scenes or something.
Right.
But not to the extent he's in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, he's like basically the third main character of the movie, I would say. Like behind John Hurd and Lindsay Krause, I think Goldblum might be like the third lead of the movie, but we'll get to that in a minute. Goldblum plays Max Arloft, the rock and roll music critic at the main line, an alternative newspaper published in Boston. He's a major character, but our lead is Harry Lucas, a once great reporter that everyone agrees is sort of just coasting now, and he's played by the great character actor John Hurd, who's probably best known for playing Kevin's dad in the Home Alone movies.
Yep.
And also, I've been watching the first season of The Sopranos recently. He's terrific in that show, too. He has a recurring role where he plays like a private detective that Tony hires. So there is that, too. But yeah, and he's been in a bunch of things. He actually passed away a couple of years ago, but he was one of the great character actors in like the 80s and 90s. And Harry has sort of an on-off relationship with Abby, played by Lindsay Krause, known for movies like Slapshot, The Verdict, and Places in the Heart, for which he got an Oscar nomination. From there, you've got Michael, a reporter at the paper, trying to get out and write a book instead, and he's played by Stephen Collins, best known as the dad on Seventh Heaven. He's in a relationship with Laura, a photographer played by Gwen Wells, who also appeared in California Split and Nashville, which gives us another three-peat Goldblum reunion, Mike.
My God, we're racking them up.
There you go. After last week, where Christopher Walken became the first three-peat Goldblum reunion, although I would argue this one counts more because he and Gwen Wells actually have scenes together in 2 of the 3 movies that they were in.
True.
Whereas he and Walken have not even seen each other. Bruno Kirby, who had just appeared in The Godfather Part 2 and would show up again in movies like City Slickers and When Harry Met Sally. He plays David, the new kid working for the paper that Jeff Goldblum kind of takes under his wing. Jill Eikenberry from LA Law plays Lynn, the receptionist for the paper. Lane Smith, who was the mayor in Red Dawn, plays Roy Walsh, the evil businessman at the end who buys the paper. Michael J. Pollard, known for movies like Bonnie and Clyde and Tango and Cash, he plays the hawker, the guy who gives away newspapers on the street. Curious if you recognize this guy, Mike. Joe Morton, Miles Dyson from Terminator 2, the guy who invented Skynet. Okay.
How could I not?
Yeah, of course. He plays Ahmed, another reporter at the paper. Raymond J. Barry, who was Raylan Givens' dad on Justified, and also Dewey Cox's dad in Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story. He plays conceptual artist Herbert Fisk in my favorite scene of the movie. And Mary Lou Henner from the TV series Taxi gets her film debut here as Danielle, a stripper being interviewed by Harriet Abbey. And finally, at the very end of the film, Jeff Goldblum meets a guy named Doug Henkel at the bar. That guy is played by Douglas Kenney, the co-founder of National Lampoon magazine. Which is, kind of cool nod to another major alternative magazine of the 70s right there.
Yeah, it was a fun, there was, all throughout this movie, I was like, kind of taking notes, like sort of in and out a little bit. And I would look up and be like, wait a second, is that this guy? And yeah, it is. And then, a couple minutes later, I'd be like, hold on, is that this guy? And yeah, it turns out it was. This movie is stacked for no reason.
Yeah. Jam-packed with all kinds of character actors, which was pretty awesome. So Between the Lines was written by Fred Barron, who would go on to mostly work in television, including acting as the creator of Caroline in the City, which was an NBC sitcom in the 90s starring Leah Thompson. Ran for 4 years. It was part of NBC's must-see TV Thursdays, aired right between Seinfeld and ER, but I don't think it attained the status that those shows have. Which is, whatever. But it was directed by Joan Micklin Silver 1 year after her previous film, a TV movie based on an F. Scott Fitzgerald story called Bernice Bobs Her Hair, and 2 years before her next film, 1979's Chilly Scenes of Winter. The movie was released on April 27th, 1977. Didn't exactly make a big splash at the box office. Took in about $15,000, which, 70s money. That's like $1 billion. Who knows? But it The math may be off on that. It doesn't seem like any other major movies were released that day, but this was about a week after Annie Hall was released in theaters. So maybe you were catching up on that one instead of seeing this one. And for context, we're about a month away now from Star Wars being released and changing movies forever. Just, it's weird to think about, Annie Hall and Star Wars were in theaters at the same time. But obviously they were because they were, nominated for Best Picture against each other and that kind of thing. Right. But just, I always think back and man, it's weird that, Blade Runner and The Thing came out on the same day, It's like these movies that are iconic celebrated classics. You could have gone see both of them in their first run the same weekend. It's wild.
That's crazy.
And the IMDb plot synopsis for Between the Lines reads, story of an underground newspaper in Boston about to be taken over by big business. So Mike, Between the Lines, which we should point out is available for free on YouTube right now, probably illegally. Just, I don't know if you...
We don't need to talk about it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's fine for us to watch it. It's on YouTube. It's free to it's not like we're going through alternative means. We just looked up YouTube and there it was. But it is there, available for as long as people want to watch it until it gets taken down. But that happens with a lot of these kind of obscure 70s movies too. People just put it up there and nobody really takes it down because nobody actually knows it's there. So Between the Lines is up there if people do want to watch it. Mike, did you watch it via YouTube as well?
Yes, I did.
Okay, yeah, so did I. So what were your overall thoughts on Between the Lines?
Between the Lines is a pretty like a light and fluffy hangout good time, like I'm shaking my shoulders, like I'm dancing a little bit kind of movie because it's a audio medium. It's one of those things. It's just a big group of people that work at this alternative newspaper that are just kind of sleazing it up, living their life in the alternative Boston neighborhood or whatever it's supposed to be. It kind of makes sense that it was based on people that the filmmakers had experience working at these places like the Village Voice, or those newspapers. Because I was thinking they're kind of acting as if this is like Greenwich Village, but it's it's Boston. But anyway, only because we happen to watch Next Stop Greenwich Village.
Yeah, I like this movie too. It's solid, little hangout movie in every sense of the word. Very little in the way of plot happening here. It does remind me of Next Stop Greenwich Village in a lot of ways too. Just the way the movie is structured. It being a nostalgic look at the last time this large group of people was kind of together as certain members go on to different life paths and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it. I wasn't overly enthusiastic about it, I guess. It wasn't I wasn't as attached to this movie as I was Next Up Greenwich Village. I wasn't as immediately into it as much as I wanted to hang out. I really wanted to just hang out with the characters in Next Up Greenwich Village. And this movie, I might want to hang out with Jeff Goldblum. I think Jeff Goldblum's a lot of fun. Everyone else is you guys are fine. You guys are nice and all, but I was downloading some of the files I'm going to need for this episode, and I was looking at the trailers for this movie. One of them was a new trailer done for the restoration that was done last year, And one of them quoted a review from Variety saying it's a story about growing up from people who should have grown up already. And I think that's a very apt description. It's basically, these are all people in like their late 20s, early 30s. They've already been working for several years, and they've, been around the block a few times with this newspaper, and the newspaper is kind of on its way out. It's dying. It's becoming something else, a little more corporate. And they either have to get on board with that or, find something else to do with their lives. And, that's, I think, a pretty compelling thing. It's actually, I think, going through the letterbox reviews of this movie, seems like if you were a journalist, you're super into this movie.
That tracks.
Yeah, like I think it really accurately depicts the experience, even though it took place in the 70s. And, obviously the whole journalism landscape is entirely different now than what it used to be. But, just the idea of like having like this really cool, independent, journalistic voice being smothered by this corporation. It's a universal feeling, I think. It transcends any time period. But yeah, I really enjoyed the movie. Not one that I would want to hang out in the way I want to hang out with Next Stop Greenwich Village. But it's a pleasant enough time. It's a good enough time, fun performances. Some real standout scenes, so yeah, really dug it.
Yeah. I kind of, I feel like I might fall a little bit more on the negative side than that, because it sort of wants to be a comedy hangout character piece, and I feel like it kind of somehow manages to walk the line between being very funny and very compelling, and kind of does neither. You know what I mean? Like it's not bad, but it's not hilarious, and it's not very compelling with its characters. So it's just kind of like there. It's sort of where I'm going. So I think like it's good enough. It's fine. It would have been fun to see like in a mystery Goldblum marathon or whatever that was. But otherwise, I don't know if I would say like necessarily you have to go out of your way to see this hidden gem in Goldblum's filmography kind of deal. But it is for free on YouTube. So like, go ahead, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, the most notable thing about this movie is that it is, the first real performance you got from Jeff Goldblum in terms of his career. So Mike, let's talk about Jeff Goldblum for the first time really on this podcast.
Yeah.
What did you think of Jeff Goldblum in Between the Lines?
Oh, baby, Goldblum everywhere in this movie. Man, he's here. He got a substantial role, and he wants everybody to fucking know about it in the best way possible. It's the full Goldblum stutter, like, just kind of stepping all over himself or talking all over himself and everything. But in this kind of like cool, suave rock music beat way, which is very funny. One of my favorite things about this movie is the first hour or so is all this buildup to making it to the Southside Johnny and the Asbury Juke Show, baby, which is the funniest fucking thing ever to me. Because I honestly love Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, and that's so funny. Yeah, it's bizarre.
That's great. That's awesome. They're the band that are playing at the party thing kind of thing they're at?
Yeah, it's like a record promo event or something or whatever.
Gotcha.
That, like Goldblum's like, oh, I'm going to write about that on Thursday night for the Friday issue or whatever. And the guy's like, you're never going to make it. That whole thing. Yeah, they're like a band that was sort of like in the Bruce Springsteen orbit, but much smaller because Asbury Jukes, like Asbury Park. Right. So like my parents were big fans of Southside Johnny and all that stuff. So like we've still seen him. He's still around. They're still touring, which is very funny.
That's awesome.
Anyway, yeah, it was like such a weird nitpick detail for this movie to have. Like they show up in the credits, in the opening credits, and I was like, what the fuck?
Right.
And then the whole plot of the first half of the movie is trying to make it to the show on time and all that stuff.
Did you watch this movie with your parents out of curiosity?
No, but I think they would have really enjoyed this. I almost did. They decided not to.
Oh, man. And then you told them about Southside Johnny, and they were like, no!
No! How are we going to get on YouTube and watch this?
It's one step too far. They can't make it.
That's right.
But yeah, this is the role where Jeff Goldblum emerges as Jeff Goldblum. There was hints of that with Next Stop Greenwich Village when he popped up in that movie, right? And that was a very Goldblum-y performance. But he's only in 2 scenes of that movie. And they're, really good scenes, but he's only in maybe like 5 minutes of that movie total. Here, it's Goldblum the entire time, and it's great. It's the first time where his persona is just like on display in its full form. It is Jeff Goldblum. He has finally emerged out of the Goldblum cocoon or whatever, and he's a great fit. He's a great fit for this role too. I really like that, because it is like Goldblum is a weird actor. He's somebody who attained leading man status, even though he's like a very unconventional leading man, and he's somebody who is, people thirst after him on Twitter to this day. It's one of those things where it's like people have like massive crushes on Jeff Goldblum for, whatever reason. It's the quirkiness or whatever. And, he's Jeff Goldblum. He's good looking and stuff like that. But it is just like, he's a character. He's somebody who was meant to be a character actor, I think, and somebody who just like popped up is sort of in roles like this, right, in between the lines, where he's like maybe like third or fourth build and kind of that, and then like later on in his career, he's like, you know, a lead in Jurassic Park and a lead in Independence Day, and it's like Blockbusters just starred Jeff Goldblum for a while. For a while.
Don't you miss those days?
Man, I really miss. I think we were talking about that on one of our other episodes, where it's like, you know, we all like, you know, Chris Evans and everything like that, but like bring the Walter Matthau's of the world back, you know?
Yeah. Where's my Elliot Gould movies?
Yes. Where's our Jeff Goldblum blockbusters? I know he's still in like Thor Ragnarok and stuff, but he's not the lead in those movies. I want Jeff Goldblum to play Thor.
I'm in.
Is basically what I'm saying. But yeah, he's great in this movie. You know, he's sarcastic, he's quick-witted, ultimately like a little bit sad, which I like too. I've talked about that in the past, where it's like that little bit of like melancholy is always like a nice touch to me, I think. He is by far, I think, the best thing about this movie. So that is pretty great. So that was awesome to just be able to like, you know, click on the YouTube link, not knowing what to expect. I figured he would have a bigger role in this movie just because I had seen like on the Wikipedia page he had gotten like third billing. But that Wikipedia article from Between the Lines is very small. Like, there's not much detail about the movie there, including a lot of the cast is just not listed on there. Like Gwen Wells, who's a major part of this movie, is not listed on the Wikipedia page at all. You know,
Whoops.
so it's one of those things where it's like it's a stub. There's, you know, it doesn't have all the details there. But Goldblum was like third billed on there, so I was like, oh, he must have like a decent role in this movie. And it turns out, yeah, he's kind of there throughout the thing. So that was pretty great to see. So how do you think this role fits into the roles that we've seen Jeff Goldblum play so far, Mike?
I mean, it's the kind of standout on its own role so far. I mean, I guess like you said, it's kind of the most akin to Next Stop Greenwich Village, and that it's that's the second most substantial role compared to this one so far. But that's only because he's got lines in that movie.
Right.
You know, he's got some dialogue. But yeah, I feel like, I mean, and like we sort of have already drawn parallels to the plot or feel of Next Stop Greenwich Village in terms of just following this cast of characters as they, you know, kind of age and mature through this moment. But yeah, I guess that's kind of really it. I don't see. I mean, in California Split, it's he runs that publishing house or whatever where where they work. So there's that, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I don't know about the character specifically, but I did mention before the movie reminded me in some ways of Next Stop Greenwich Village. So there was that. I think that's the closest point of comparison. And yeah, I think again, you see the persona coming out there in Next Stop Greenwich Village, and you honestly see it coming out a little bit in Nashville without any dialogue. But then in this movie, you really get that in full force. It also continues the trend we've noticed of Goldblum having a very distinctive wardrobe, which we talked about a lot in this podcast too, where, you know, it seems like every time Goldblum pops up, he has like a weird hat or something like that. You know, and this time around, he's always wearing a red bomber jacket over a green jumpsuit with like the slicked back hair, and it's a really good look. I really wanted that jacket, and at one point he loses the jacket, and it's like a huge character moment for him, and I was like really upset that he lost his jacket.
Yeah, it's tragic.
Like it took me a minute, and then I realized like, oh wait, he's wearing this jacket in every scene of the movie. Like, you never see him without the jacket until he loses the jacket, which I thought was a really great touch. And so again, Goldblum, just friends with every costume designer in Hollywood. I'm not sure exactly how he did it, but I think that's how he got discovered. I think he just walked into every wardrobe department being like, put me in the weirdest thing you have, and then there you go. So the red bomber jacket, the green jumpsuit, and the slick back hair, it works for him. It's really good.
Yeah, I agree. I like the whole thing, and it's like his mojo. I think he even says like, I can't write without the jacket, and it's like this whole big thing, like, you know, symbolizing the fall of the newspaper, I guess. No, I don't know. But
it kind of like it might be, yeah. So what are the moments or scenes in Between the Lines that stood out to you, Mike?
I think the first big Goldblum moment is when he takes David. Is that the new guy's name?
Yeah, David's the new guy played by Bruno Kirby.
Yes, yeah. He takes him to the record shop to help him sell his records that he no longer needs because he only makes $75 a week. And he's teaching him how to use or how to tell the difference between a good and a bad bootleg record. And it kind of becomes who's on first for a little bit, and that was very funny.
You know how to tell a good bootleg from a bad bootleg?
No.
I'll tell you. You look for two things, if it's warped or if it's straight. If it's warped, that's not what you want straight. If it's black, the color, if it's shiny black, that's what you want. If it's gray, that's not what you want. So what do you look for if it's no good? One. What do you look for? One.
What?
If you see what, it's no good. One. If you see what? One. It's no good. One. If you see what, it's no good.
What? One.
One what?
If it's
What?
This doesn't,
What? What?
this doesn't really concern me, Max. One.
One, if it's what? One, if it's, yeah.
One,
One.
it's illegal, Max. And two, you can get in an awful lot of trouble.
Oh, I can't get in an awful lot of trouble. The duck will get in an awful lot of trouble. That's first of all. That's one.
Who's the duck?
He's a record promoter. He rips off rehearsal tapes, he presses them himself, and he sells them on the side.
He liberates collector's items for the public.
Well, that's the other way of looking at it. Did you read in the paper where he's running for city council?
Kevin Austin on the city council.
Sort of shocking,
You mean
isn't it?
Kevin
See?
Austin is the duck?
Who said that? I didn't say that.
The guy with the big sound studio over
Be
on
generous,
Ross
be
Ave?
generous. Wait a minute. Where are the prices for this? I see 50 cents for the first one. Are you writing down the albums or you're writing down the prices?
I'll be writing down the prices afterwards.
You just want to write down the titles first, is that it?
Get an idea.
I'd like to see the prices as you go along.
You'll see them.
I'll see them?
Sure.
Oh,
I'll give you a whole total.
A whole-
Reasonable, good price.
a good price?
Best price in town.
Well, that's all I want.
How can you do better?
How can I do better? That's why I come to you.
Yes, yeah, I really like the whole sequence, and that is kind of the first major Goldblum scene you have. And I really like how it's like that sequence onward. Like Goldblum is just sort of stuck with David at the beginning, right? And then
Right.
but he clearly wants to pass his knowledge along to somebody throughout the movie. Like he's somebody who knows a lot about rock music and he's like really passionate about it, but he wants everybody else to be passionate about it too. And so he's trying to like shape the young minds and being like, all right, I'm going to pass this knowledge on to you. And he gets really attached to David as a result. And then at the end of the movie, you know, David gets sent on like a dangerous assignment. I don't remember exactly what happened, like why he was going into that like, you know, dark alley or whatever where the guy was. But David got sent like a dangerous assignment, and you know, Goldblum starts like running after him, and Harry and Abby, and like Goldblum like almost like gets in a car accident, and he like knocks a car door off of its hinges, and like, you know, runs off, and like Harry and Abby drive with Goldblum over there, and David gets mugged. And Goldblum is like so furious, and he's trying to chase after the guys who mugged David, but Harry holds him back and stuff like that. So I liked how attached he got to like his protege.
Yeah, it kind of starts. You can tell at the very beginning, David's just like he's the only one wearing a tie and a jacket, and like
Right.
he just does not fit in with the alternative, lifestyle or whatever that these guys are doing, and they all kind of dunk on him the whole movie, and then slowly he becomes part of the team, and that, you know, as it becomes about the corporate takeover and how we need to stick together kind of feel. I did appreciate that because most of these guys suck for most of the movie.
Right, and then the last time you see David too, after the paper's been bought, now David's the cool guy. Like now David's the guy with experience, trying to teach and impress like a new intern who is like a young, like another David. He's like he's like the notepad and the tie and everything like that, and he's trying to like write down everything David's saying, and David's like, yeah, you know, if you want to work 9 to 5 and go to sleep at night, this ain't the job for you, man, and that kind of thing. Which is pretty great. I like seeing that, like the influence Goldblum had on David throughout the movie, like really take effect in that last sequence. So that was pretty good. I think to me, the standout sequence in the movie also involves Goldblum. It's the scene where conceptual artist Herbert Fisk arrives, and he kind of just shows up, hands Lynn, the secretary, like his card, and she's like, conceptual artist Herbert Fisk, and he just like destroys something. I think he destroys the phone.
Typewriter.
The typewriter. He like takes the typewriter and smashes it against the floor, and then he's like, smash typewriter. And that's his art, basically.
Yeah.
And then Goldblum like kind of starts retaliating, and he like goes and like rips a pinboard off the wall, and he's like, fallen pinboard, and that they just the thing just keeps escalating like over and over again, where like Fisk will like destroy something, and then Goldblum will destroy something, and at this point they're just wrecking stuff around the office. And then Stanley comes out, and finally Goldblum like rips off Stanley's shirt and writes "Ha" on his stomach. And that was like the end of it, and then Herbert Fisk leaves. But I love that whole sequence. It's great. It's just, and you know, I probably won't play that as like a clip because that's like, you know, a very physical thing. There's not a lot of dialogue in that sequence. But it's great. Like if you want to watch this movie, that's like it's like an hour in. Like it's my favorite sequence in the movie.
Yeah. I love the like names they give for the pieces. Like I forget what I think he calls it like paper in flight when he rips the bulletin board down, and like it's like all just like so pretentious, like the names, and it's so perfect. Like Stanley exposed when he rips his shirt open. It's like the best. It's so perfect.
Yeah. And Stanley is that guy who's, you know, just kind of the guy who's like, I guess, in charge of the money of the paper, and he's the one who's like trying to sell it off and that kind of thing, or he's the one who's like welcoming in our corporate overlords. And everybody hates Stanley, and you know, everybody gives Stanley a lot of shit throughout the movie, but he's like the Weasley guy who just wants to make money. And at one point, Frank has like this whole monologue at the beginning where he's like, I'm going to punch you, Stanley. One day, I'm going to be able to punch you right in the face. And he never does. He never punches Stanley in the face. But at the very end of the movie, Lynn like hits him in the nuts with the phone. So there is that. But yeah, the rivalry with Stanley throughout the movie, I think, is pretty great. And at one point, like, I think Goldblum calls him like a pernicious eel, which is
Yes.
a really great insult. So there is that also.
Yeah, I do love that whole speech Frank gives him about, like, the day I quit is the day I'm able to punch you finally, and the more you make my life a hell, the faster that day will come, and and all that stuff.
Right.
And the honest way he describes the paper as everyone works here is either on the way up or the way out or the way down. So
Yeah.
like, we're a real dangerous bunch kind of thing is what he's getting at. So yeah. I mean, it's a fun little movie,
Yeah, totally. Also, one of the big Goldblum scene I wanted to shout out. There's this one sequence where he's trying to teach a class of college-age girls rock history, and he has this whole monologue that travels to like some existential thoughts about Blackbird by the Beatles.
Yeah.
And I really like this. It's sort of like the same trajectory as with David. It starts out in a place where you think he's just trying to impress these girls, right? Like they're like all gathered around and they're all kind of looking at him like, "Wow, you're Jeff Goldblum," and that kind of thing. But then he gets like really into what he's talking about, and he begins to like analyze it and to start discussing philosophy. And then when he realizes that nobody else is as into it as he is, he like quickly adjusts and then just gives the whole room his phone number, and then that's the end of of the sequence.
What girls? What are we talking about here? We're talking about the artist. And what does the artist do? He does precisely that, to do. The verb to act, coming from the Latin actus perfectus dansungen mein Tag gestecktes. What the point here is, let me give you an example to illustrate what I'm talking about. In Blackbird, when the Beatles sing, "Blackbird fly into the light of the dark black night," how different is that really from Wallace Stevens' 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird, where he says a man and a woman are one. A man and a woman and a blackbird are one. How different are those things really? Hands. I'll tell you the answer. The answer is that they're a lot different. There's virtually no connection, except they're both about blackbirds. Listen, girls, Frauleins, senoritas. The only real answer to the question, whither rock and roll, is hither. Some misguided people think that the answer is thither. They're wrong. Those theories are passé. They say that rock is here to stay. You've heard them say that rock is here to stay. They never say where. Certainly not at my house. I don't have the room. My telephone number is 462-0702.
I also love the little tag at the end of it where they play a little bit of Blackbird by the Beatles. Like they play like, the like, intro music. I was like, wow, could they afford Blackbird by the Beatles? That's wild. And then the song stops. And it's like, oh, I guess not.
Get those free 10 seconds in. And then
Exactly, yeah. But I thought that was a really good sequence. What did you think of that whole thing, Mike? I think it does reinforce Goldblum's character, especially with David too, where he's just like, I want to impasse this knowledge onto somebody.
Yeah. I thought that was very funny where he's like, and how is that any different from this poem? And he or whatever it was. I don't even really remember what he's quoting. And he kind of looks up and he's just getting all these blank stares. And he's like, well, fucking nothing. They're just talking about blackbirds. That's the only similarity. And then he realizes they're all writing down everything he's saying. So he gives his phone number, which is great.
Yeah, that was really, really solid. So yeah, Goldblum, easily I think the highlight of the movie. But outside of Goldblum, I mean, kind of the main characters in the movie are Harry and Abby, and also Michael and Laura. There's these kind of two relationships that run parallel to each other. I think they maybe feel a little bit too similar. Like I think both have like dudes who are looking to leave the paper and write a book, and both have women who are talented and probably being held back by these two dudes. I think the difference is that John Hurd is really charming as Harry. Like John Hurd's really great, and is clearly a better guy than Michael, like from the outset. So the Harry Abby stuff I think is a little more fun, and there's a sequence where he ends up hooking up with Laura and stuff like that, and there's like there's a genuine flirtation there. And I think at the heart of Harry there's like a pretty decent guy, whereas at the heart of Michael he's kind of a shithead. And so there's all that stuff. I like the scene where like Harry goes to meet Abby at the train station, and she still gets in the train, and he's just like talking to himself in the tarmac, like all that stuff. That's really good. But yeah, what did you think of the two kind of central relationships here with Harry and Abby and Michael and Laura, and then briefly Harry and Laura, I guess?
I mean, I think their performances are pretty good. I just didn't particularly care enough about any of the relationships as characters to like really really, that's sort of what I was trying to say before, where it's like, well, I mean, it's not hilarious and it's not really that engaging on a character level. So like, yeah, okay, sure, this movie exists. Although John Hurd is pretty good. He's charming with his whole like shaggy haired, like beleaguered, once great reporter thing going on, who's now just like not sure what to do about his life. And he's, sleeping on the floor, like the mattress on the floor with no frame. And he's only got tuna in the fridge or whatever the hell, and like all that stuff. His girlfriend is ready to move on, and like you said before, like these two men are just holding back their more talented girlfriends, and they're just kind of dragging them along. I was really disappointed that Michael ends up dragging Laura. I forgot. Laura.
Laura's Gwen Wells, and Lynn is the secretary, the one played by the girl from
Oh, okay. So many people were in so many things in this movie.
I know.
But Laura ends up deciding to move to New York with him in the end, and it was like, oh man, that's bullshit. Like, she would never, like, why? What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I think it's meant to kind of emphasize the difference between the two couples, between Harry and Abby, and between Michael and Laura, where Harry and Abby, at the end of the movie, they basically get back together, and that's like, they're doing okay on their own. Harry's been fired from the paper, so he's been like pushed out, and Michael has chosen to leave the paper like on his own, and now Laura is too, because she's moving to New York. So it's one of those things where like everybody has to leave. And it seems like Laura is, she's doing really good work. She may not want to like stick around with the corporate overlords anyway. So this might just be her way out, and then like she just hangs out in New York for a year and moves on to something else. I don't know. I'm speculating on what these fictional characters in the 70s are going to be doing in the future. Yeah. But I think it felt realistic to me. I feel like they're in a pretty toxic sort of abusive relationship, and like just the circular nature of that, I guess. In the way that kind of played out. So it's a bummer for sure. I would have liked Laura to not stick around with Michael and go to New York, but it's what happened. But I do like when, they're at the party sequence. There's the whole party scene, with that big, like, kind of dance concert and everything. Is that the band that you were talking about?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
That's Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes.
Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes. They were good. They were really, I mean, they play that one song that lasts for like 18 minutes or whatever.
Yeah. I think they also do the score for the whole movie. I'm not 100% sure, but it sounds kind of like it.
Really? Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, they play that one song. It's like, we're having a party, and it's like, yeah, we are having a party. It's the party scene, and it lasts like 18. It lasts forever. And I was like, it was one of those things like, do you remember Graduation Day, the slasher movie that we saw at like the Hudson Horror Show? It was like the horror marathon, and it's like a slasher movie, and there's like this one sequence where there's just a long song. They're at like a big party scene, and it goes on for like 7 or 8 minutes, and it was like this, except with less killing. Or this was like with less killing, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. There's a Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray of that, by the way, in case you were wondering.
Ooh, very cool.
Yes.
But yeah, so I did like that whole song. It was catchy. But yeah, so that whole sequence, I thought the party sequence was really good. That's where Goldblum's hanging out there. At the party, he meets a couple of cute girls named Annie 1 and Annie 2. And they're both from like Bend, Oregon, and Goldblum like thinks about, hey, maybe I should go to Bend, Oregon or something like that. And somewhere along the way, he loses his red jacket, which we've seen him wear in the whole movie. Which we talked about before, and he like yells at Michael about it. Michael's there, and he's like, Michael has sold his book already, and he's like ready to leave, and he's yelling at Michael, and Michael's like, fuck you, and all that stuff. Verbatim dialogue. And then and then eventually he confronts Stanley about it, which is when he finds out that the paper is being sold, and he never gets his red jacket back, and it's really sad.
You looking for something?
Yes, Stanley, I'm looking for my jacket.
Well, maybe it's with my shirt that you tore. You do have to pay me for that,
That shirt, yes. I'm returning it. It was torn. I sort of like the one you have on, though. It's kind of a powder blue, isn't it?
Yeah, just stay away from me. You.
Lunatic, vandal, madman, what are you looking for?
Get away from me.
Yeah, I'll bet you took my jacket. I'll bet you have it hidden away at a sniff with the
stay away
pool,
from me.
don't you?
Stay away from me.
Back, Stanley, back.
All right, get all your laughs now. Because I'm the one who's going to be laughing when Roy Walsh takes over. Because then you'll toe the line, you nut. Because Walsh won't put up with any of your crap. Didn't know that we had a new publisher, did you? Well, that doesn't surprise me.
He loses his independent spirit there, That's it. It's gone. He lost the jacket, his mojo. Now that they're sold out. That's it.
Yeah, the jacket was the one thing keeping them from being sold, and now it's
Now it's gone.
But yeah, and during that sequence, that's when we realize, like, Laura's like getting really upset with Michael. She doesn't want to go to New York with them. At the party, they have to celebrate. She goes home with Harry, and then Michael finds her at Harry's place, and there's a big fight over there. And John Hurt has a really good line where he's like, if you're gonna fight me, can I put on clothes first or something like that? Which is pretty good. But then it's like after that sequence where Laura decides, like, okay, I'm gonna go to New York with Michael. So yeah, kind of a bummer there. But I do really like the way the movie ends. I mean, the meeting with the new publisher Roy Walsh does not go well.
As you might expect.
Yeah, exactly. And, Lynn, who's the receptionist, she quits right after the meeting, and she thinks that everybody's, like, in solidarity with her. Like, everybody's like, I'm also going to quit. And then, like, nobody backs her up, and it's like, oh, great. A lot of solidarity on this team. Later, guys. And just pieces out, which was great. It, like, briefly made her my favorite character in the movie until Jeff Goldblum came back.
Right.
And Walsh forces Frank to fire Harry, and Harry has, there's the meeting between Frank and Harry where he's like, Harry's getting upset and he leaves. He has a daydream about walking back into the office and shooting at Walsh, and then it turns out in the daydream it's like a pop gun, like it's like a like it's a little like
a plunger.
Yeah, like a little plunger like coming out of the gun. So it's not a real gun in the daydream. So I thought like it was actually happening for a second, where it's like this would be a pretty funny thing to actually happen in the movie, and then it turns out to be a daydream. It's like, oh, okay. It's a weird sequence because if it was a daydream, like it wouldn't be crazy to like make that a real gun or whatever. Like it's just him like being like furious or whatever. He's in that sequence. But then it's like really it's not really happening. So it's like, well, why is it a pop gun? Like it's just very strange.
Just to maintain the silliness of the whole movie, Mike.
That's true. Yeah, and Harry is not nearly as like dark of a person as Michael is, so it makes sense that he's not trying to actually kill his boss. But I like the idea that he's just like really thinks about pranking him. And it's like all his revenge is going to be is just him marching in there and like boop, and leaving. But then after that, he's gone, and Harry and Abby meet at a hotel bar. They kind of get back together, and then Goldblum meets up with them. Goldblum shows up at the bar, and he tells them, "Hey, I'm leaving too. I'm going to Bend, Oregon." And they're like, "What? Really? Nah, I'm not doing that." Turns out to be a joke. And then Harry and Abby leave. Goldblum stays, and that's where you see this guy Doug Hinkle or whatever, who's played by Doug Kenny, and he starts like manipulating this guy Doug to buy him a drink.
Yeah.
And then they kind of like talks to him enough until he realizes like, hey, he's the rock columnist for the main line. This is pretty cool. And they talk for a few minutes, and the credits just roll on Goldblum. And I think that's like the main indication that this is the first movie that realized like what they had in Jeff Goldblum. They just let Goldblum talk for like 2 minutes while the credits roll, basically.
Yeah. That whole scene was pretty great.
Yeah, I love that. And I just like the whole conversation they're having with the music kind of starting to swell. I think Goldblum also has like a really great, perfect music critic line in that sequence where they're talking. I forget what band they're talking about, but Goldblum's like, well, they're talented, but they're not good,
Yeah.
It's just like that was like that's somebody who spent a lot of time around music critics wrote that line. That was pretty great.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I love that whole sequence, and then that's the end of the movie. The credits roll, and then that's it for Between the Lines. So, any other stuff throughout the movie, Mike, that you wanted to kind of briefly bring up? Any scenes that stood out to you that we didn't mention?
I mean, we sort of talked about David's plotline, and I really enjoyed just like how low stakes most of this movie is. Like I said, the whole plot is trying to make it to that Southside Johnny show kind of thing, and then David's whole like big investigative journalism break is trying to unmask the duck who makes the bootleg records, who's actually a music record producer guy in like the local studio or something. And that's where he goes to the docks and gets beat up by those two guys.
Right. Yes.
Yes. But I just think that's so funny that it's just like, this whole, like, it's the alternative small underground newspaper in Boston. Like, they're not really doing anything huge. He's just trying to figure out, unmask the guy that's making bootlegs.
Right.
Like, I don't,
And they talk about that too in the movie, where they were saying, everybody involved, this paper's been around for a while. And the early days, I mean, they were uncovering, nursing home scandals and that kind of thing, right?
Right.
And, they thought they were making like a real difference, and then, like, nothing would happen kind of thing. Like, the nursing home scandal would get out there, and people would be upset about it, and, maybe one person would go down, and, like, the nursing home would just continue business as usual, and that kind of thing. And that's why, like, a lot of the characters, like Harry and Michael, have been so disillusioned with the paper over the recent years. So I really like that detail about it, where it is, like, it's pretty low stakes. Like, and the characters, like, realize that.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the whole like disillusionment of journalism and like, how difficult that job can be. I mean, there's that whole sequence where they go to the strip club and they're like interviewing Mary Lou Henner about just being a stripper, and that's basically it. Like there's no real
Right.
stakes to that. There's no reason why they're interviewing her. They're just interviewing her because she's a stripper, basically.
Yeah.
Basically. And there's the whole, like, it's Harry and Abby, and, Harry's trying to take over the interview because he's, like, the real reporter, and he thinks Abby's just, like, the photographer or whatever. And, she gets upset about that, and there's the whole sequence where she, like, puts on, like, a bunch of the stripper stuff, and he laughs at her, and, it's all that. And so they like, break up, then they get back together, and then they break up and get back together. It's a whole thing. It's a whole roller coaster ride of emotions between Harry and Abby, Mike.
Yeah. Yeah, and I did also really like that touch at the end with Doug Kenny from National Lampoon, who was one of those moments where I was like, wait, is that the guy? And then I pulled up Google and was like, it is the guy. Yeah, that's pretty funny. And I feel like that was the moment where I was kind of like, I think maybe this movie walks the line a little too well, where it's like, some of the stuff you hear about National Lampoon, this movie doesn't come anywhere close to, like the stuff that went on in those offices. So I feel like if it had just been as outlandish and crazy as National Lampoon, it might have been funnier or whatever. So it kind of just was like, it's a little too nice, I guess, if it's too neatly in between both worlds for me.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, this was mostly based on the, as far as, like, based on stuff, this is based on the Boston Phoenix, which was also a newspaper back in the day. And so, yeah, I don't know what the offices were like there, but there you go. But if you do want to watch a movie about the National Lampoon offices, David Wayne made a movie a couple years ago called A Futile and Stupid Gesture, which is really great. It stars Will Forte as Doug Kenny, and Joel McHale plays Chevy Chase. Did you ever watch that movie?
I did, yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay, yeah, you saw that movie. Okay, then. Yeah, I like the movie a lot, and I think if people watch Between the Lines and they are craving that more like National Lampoon style thing, that one's much more of an outright comedy.
Right.
But you should definitely watch that. It's really good.
And there's that documentary too. Sorry, I think it's Drunk, Stupid, Stone, Dead or something like that.
Yes, yeah, Drunk, Stone, Brilliant, Dead, or whatever it is. Yeah,
something,
I believe. Yeah. I know the Will Forte one is a Netflix original, so that's there.
Yes,
and I believe the documentary is also on Netflix. I'm not sure if that's an original movie, so it could be taken down. I don't know. But the narrative movie directed by David Wayne, starring Will Forte, that's on Netflix right now. Worth checking out. I think it's very good.
Definitely.
All right, so I believe that kind of wraps up our thoughts on Between the Lines from 1977. So should we move on to some Letterboxd reviews, Mike?
Yes. What do the people have to say?
All right, here's what the people have to say. Here's a 4-star review from Jenna Ipkar, which reads, "Wow, I love this. It's a movie about the end of an era, the downturn of the 70s, evolving into the capitalist fuckfest of the 80s. But more than anything, it's a love-in character study of the death of a great group dynamic. In that way, it reminded me of and felt a bit like a spiritual sequel to Next Stop Greenwich Village." There you go. This is that film about the last hurrah of that perfect golden group of coworkers or friends you had at that job that started with such promise and petered out when you weren't looking. Everybody's faults are becoming unmanageable, and everybody's patterns are fully recognizable, and the only way to break the cycle or prevent it from turning extremely bitter is to simply walk away. To set it all in a fringe newspaper that's seen better days helps to elevate it to a larger meaning, but who cares when everybody is so fun, funny, recognizable, sad, and sweet. John Hurd and Jeff Goldblum positively steal the show here, Hurd as the aimless talent who can't overcome his insecurities, and Goldblum as the hungry hustler type who's too honest and loose to ever rise above his niche. I also loved Lindsay Krause as the photographer who reveals herself to be far more talented than the rest of them, but probably doesn't want to fight an uphill battle her entire life to prove it. Honestly, the entire cast was fantastic here, laugh out loud in the theater funny. I do wish they could have done without the cliche 70s shit where all women must be topless for 5 seconds for no reason, but at least they made John Hurd's butt do it too. Real gem of a little film, man. Great character study. So there you go. It's a 4-star review of the movie right there. Here's a review from Kristen Yoon-soo Kim, who's a journalist. She didn't give it a star rating, but she wrote, 70s media Twitter. Exactly like my last 6 months at Complex, except an incredibly fun viewing experience.
Holy shit.
Yeah, wow. Take that, Complex. Here's a 4-star review from Christian Ryan. I want to live in this movie. I'll take the corner desk over at Bruno Kirby, pay for Jeff Goldblum's drinks, and sleep on John Hurd's couch. Michael J. Pollard, Joe Morton, and I will bum around the strip club on the nights Mary Lou Henner is dancing, and I'll talk Gwen Wells out of moving to New York with that schmuck. From now on, every penny I throw into a fountain, every wishbone I break, and every birthday candle I blow out, this will be the wish that I make.
Holy shit.
That's very intense. That's a lot of love for Between the Lines.
I like it.
Here's a 3-star review from Brian Formo, which reads, "What's really different 40 years later?" He's like kind of analyzing like this compared to like journalism. They have time. What's really different 40 years later? They have time for team lunch at a restaurant outside the office in this economy? If you're tired of media Twitter but wouldn't mind watching it performed by Jeff Goldblum, John Hurd, Bruno Kirby, and Lindsay Krause in 70s garb, no less, then this is the movie for you. Personal note, at the expanding publisher I put in 3 years at, the most talented writer was laid off after one merger for writing essays instead of lists. And then a year later, I was laid off before a sale could be completed for a third time in 3 years. I own 4 websites. I could have a newsroom in here tomorrow, is an actual line of dialogue that somebody said to me. But unlike the 70s movie, no one now would quit in solidarity without a trust fund. Freelance is abysmal, bloated, and all they want are lists.
Wow.
So the state of journalism, it's pretty roughly depicted in between the lines. Seems like it's gotten way worse over the years, Mike. And finally, I got one more here. It's a 3.5-star review from Allie, which reads, I cared so little about this plot, I feel guilty, but the characters' chemistry kept me invested and entertained, cute performances, fun sets, and you guessed it, 70s Jeff Goldblum playing an annoying thought in a bomber jacket. I will definitely revisit this in the future, but in the meantime, please stay tuned for my list of Jeff Goldblum films ranked by how badly I need him to. This comment has been removed by moderator.
Wow.
Yeah, so there you go. Big Jeff Goldblum fans here
Yep.
between the lines. And, this is really the first time you get to see full-on Jeff Goldblum, so that's pretty awesome. So yeah, Between the Lines, 1977. I think we both like the movie, right?
Yeah, it's perfectly fine.
It's, I think, pretty good. I maybe liked it a little bit more than you did, but I think it's pretty good, and it's worth it just for Jeff Goldblum. I think he is really incredible in this movie, and just like, you can tell, like, as soon as he walks on screen, it's like, oh man, this guy's going to be a star. He's great. But all right, so that's going to be it for our episode on Between the Lines. Thanks so much for listening to The Complete Works. I didn't even ask you, Mike, where can we find you online this week?
This week you can find me at MD Filmblog on Twitter and Letterboxd.
And next week, where can we find you online?
At MD Filmblog on Twitter and Letterboxd.
Maybe I should modify that question because it could just be where can we find you online. But yeah, you can find me online at Emma Smith Film Blog on Twitter, Mike Smith Film on Letterboxd, Radio Mike Sandwich on Instagram. Thanks for listening to Complete Works. I'm Mike Smith, that's DeCriscio, and don't forget to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or any other podcast app. And if you want to contact us, hit us up at jeffgoldblumcompleteworks@gmail.com. You can find the rest of our podcast on Rapture Press alongside the Review Zoo, a podcast about comic books, movie news, and all that nerdy stuff. And you can follow this podcast on Twitter at GoldblumPod. Our theme song was created by Kyle Cullen, who you can reach for your own podcast themes at kylespodcastthemes@gmail.com. And our logo was designed by Jacob Honeycutt or at Jacob Honey on Twitter. Join us next week on The Complete Works. Goldblum enters 1978 with a movie called Remember My Name, which we have not been able to find anywhere yet, so it's difficult to remember that name. But we're working on it. We're going to figure it out. And we're putting out bonus episodes of Mike and Mike Go to the Movies while the quarantine is going on, so check those out too. Thanks so much for listening, guys, and remember to go for the Goldblum.